What is going on, everybody? This is Clint with the Die Hard MMA podcast, brought to you by Pub Sports Radio and Lines, presented by Superbook Sports. We're talking UFC Vegas 55, the total takedown, overs and unders. How long do we think these fights are going to go? And I honestly forgot to make this video this week. It's a little later in the day because I didn't realize it was Thursday. This week is flying. Let's get on into this one. First fight of the night. Sam Hughes taking on Elise Reed. Total set at 2.5. The over. Women's MMA minus 360 at 2.5. Under 2.5 is plus 300. And y'all know me. If I can turn a women's MMA fight on its head and go under, I absolutely will. The problem is both these women are insanely tough and insanely durable. My girl Hughes especially does the Homer Simpson strategy, knows how to take a beating on the front end, then flip the tables on you come the second and the third round. I think she's gonna kind of need to do that here. We've seen Elise Reed a little exposed on the mat, but getting taken out by Sijara Eubanks on short notice, up a weight class. I can't say that Sam is gonna have that kind of success against her, and Sam Hughes, as we know, is not somebody that goes down easy. So as much as I actually think Sam Hughes might be live for a submission or something like that crazy if this fight gets a little bit deeper, the under 2.5 isn't one that I'm really super interested in because I need both women to give me finishing upside and or the ability to be finished upside. Neither of them really give me that. So it's going to be over or nothing from a straight totals perspective. Next up, Felipe Colares taking on Chase Hooper. Total set at 2.5 for this one. Over is minus 160. The under 2.5 is plus 140. Again, this is almost the same exact situation as the last fight. Chase Hooper has an absolute brick for a head. So even though this kid is solid on the mat, he's got a good submission offense, he's going up against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt in Colares. He's going to have a big height and reach advantage, but we know he's not the biggest power striker. We know he doesn't have the most power. So are we really expecting him to knock out a guy like Felipe Colares? Not really. Submission probably really the only method of victory that I see happening here. And also not that easy when the guy outranks you belt-wise in jiu-jitsu. Felipe Colares on the flip side of this thing, is he going to submit Chase Hooper? Maybe. Black belt versus blue belt, it could happen. But he's not knocking out Chase Hooper. Nobody's knocking out Chase Hooper, especially not a guy coming up a weight class. So I expect this one to go over at minus 160. Again, I might have a little sprinkle taste on Chase Hooper by sub just because that's the crazy feeling, the tinfoil hat thing that I got going here this week. But if you're talking straight up totals, I think over 2.5 makes sense. Next up, Vince Morales taking on Jonathan Martinez. This one is kind of a pick your fighter a little bit, kind of binary here. Jonathan Martinez, he can finish. He's got that nice outside kicking game, and we have seen Vince Morales go down from leg kicks and things of that nature before. However, Jonathan Martinez usually gets it done by decision. So we'd think over 2.5, minus 220. That makes sense with Jonathan Martinez. Under 2.5, plus 195. That's probably more Vince Morales style. The guy that steps into the pocket, the guy with the big crushing overhand right power. That kind of makes a little bit more sense to me. Now, Martinez could potentially kick the leg off of Morales and go under. Vince Morales could potentially, hurt Martinez 2 rounds in a row, kind of like Perez did, make it to the judges' scorecards, and it could go over. So it's not 100% binary, but you get the point. It kind of makes sense depending on which fighter you're thinking of here. I actually think Vince Morales is live to pull the upset here. I kind of want to go under. Jonathan Martinez is a guy who we've seen clipped and rocked hurt in several recent fights, so I worry about his chin. I do think he can contribute to our finish, both offensively with that kicking game and defensively with the lack of a chin. So I think the under 2.5 at plus 195 makes a little bit of sense. I kind of like that plus number. Next up, Uros Medic taking on Omar Morales. Total set again at 2.5 for this one. The over is plus 145. The under is minus 165, and I can really only look at the under here. Uros Medic is a guy that we've seen immediately given the vet lesson once he got to the UFC level. I talked about that. He's from the Alaska FC organization. You can take the fighter out of Alaska FC, but you can never take the Alaska FC out of them. So I'm not sure where Uros Medic ranks here in the UFC. I don't even know if he belongs. He's one of these guys that could be a glass cannon. Like, he's got this incredible high-powered offense. He's big for the weight class. He's fast. fast, he's explosive. But if you get someone who can handle all that, he might just not be able to function at this level. His opponent, Omar Morales, he's relatively low volume. He's got a decent kicking game on him, but his last couple fights have been very disappointing. He's been cutting down to the wrong weight class. We've seen that kind of take a wear on him here. He's moving back up to 155. Fighters at 35, 36. I don't like seeing them ping-ponging weight classes, though. Just because he's moving back up to 155 after cutting down to 145, I don't know that we're going to see a true return to form from him either. I can't really bank on Omar for much of anything. But he does have some solid power. He does have some decent offense, and we've seen Earls maybe doesn't belong at this level. I think somebody probably is getting finished in this fight. Minus 165 for the under 2.5 makes some sense. Parker Porter taking on Jailton Almeida. Y'all are going to love this one. Total set at 1.5 for this bad boy. Over 1.5 is plus 125. The under 1.5 is minus 145. Now, full disclosure, I have a bet on the man himself, Parker Porter. I got that plus 450 in my pocket, and I think that entire bet hinges on the fact that this fight's got to get out of the first round. Jailton Almeida is hot shit right now. Everybody thinks this kid is just destined for greatness. He's going to be a UFC champion. They're all sold on him. We have seen this story before with UFC debutantes coming off the Contender Series that are just the bee's knees, but you know what? It takes them a while. So even if I agree that I think Jailton Almeida is a big deal, I don't know that he's just going to be able to dive feet first in with the big boys, especially moving up a weight class at heavyweight. So now, does Jailton Almeida go out there and slice through Parker Porter in round one? Maybe. Probably. But Parker Porter's a guy that's only been knocked out by some of the biggest, hardest punchers in the UFC. Dawkins, I mean, he's got a regional scene knockout to John Jones in like his third UFC fight ever or something. Like, I don't think Parker's chinny. So I don't know that the power of Jailton Almeida translates up to 205 against a guy that's going to have maybe a 50, 60 weight pound advantage on him come Saturday. So yeah, I think Parker Porter can survive around here. And if he does, this fight gets very interesting. I'm going to go ahead and say over 1.5 at plus 125. Jailton Almeida probably gets Parker Porter down. If Parker does everything correctly on the mat, if he survives round one, I want to see what happens come round two. Now, if he gives up his back, if he makes a mistake and makes a wrong move, then Jailton probably does go ahead and get his back and rear naked choke him. But again, if Parker does everything right, he's a very big man. He might have a strength advantage despite how these guys look when they face off, because Jailton is built like a brick shithouse. He's going to look like the stronger fighter, but don't get it twisted. Parker Porter is a real heavyweight. So that fight is very, very interesting to me. Alen Amedovski taking on Joseph Holmes. Total set at 1.5 for this one. Over 1.5 is minus 130. Under 1.5 is plus 110. And this one smells almost like a bit of a trap to me. Joseph Holmes has been talking about how he's working on his cardio. He's ready to go 15 minutes. He wants a war. Alen Amedovski is a guy who is KO or bust to the max. Haven't seen him for 3 years. Constant layoffs due to injuries, but he's training with Khamzat Chimaev. I mean, like, we really have no idea what to make of Alen Amedovski at this point in his career. I've already been well on record documented saying that I don't think Joseph Holmes is ready for the UFC at this point, so we'll see what happens in this spot. But the way this fight plays out is either Alen Amedovski nukes Joseph Holmes like he does everybody else, or Holmes probably gets his success going on the ground. He's already stated his intention to grapple. We have seen Alen Amedovski does not know what he's doing on the mat. I expect Joseph Holmes to get a TKO or a sub if it hits the floor, so both guys definitely can be finished. Both guys have that finishing upside. I'll look at under 1.5 at plus 110. Eryk Anders taking on Jun-yong Park. Total set at 2.5. The over 2.5 is minus 200 chalked, and that's the side I would look here. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Not going to waste a whole lot of time. Both these guys are very durable. Anders says he wants to go out there and wrestle and grapple. If that's the case, we're not looking at big explosive punches. Jun-yong Park, not a guy that's really known for his finishing. He likes to stick and move, use his jab. I think we're going to see a big man grappling match. Both these guys probably get tired, and it gets extended. Headed to the judges' scorecards. I like that over 2.5 minus 200. Tabatha Ricci taking on Polyana Viana. Total on this one is 2.5. Over 2.5 is minus 160. Under 2.5 is plus 140. And this is where I kind of talked about the women's MMA thing. It's almost a little suspicious. that the line is set this low in this spot here. Tabatha Ricci, BJJ black belt. Polyana Viana, supposedly a BJJ brown belt, I believe is where she's at this point. But she is the queen of the triangle armbar combo, and Tabatha Ricci is going to have a significant size disadvantage here in this spot. Polyana Viana apparently just moved out and started training with Shoot the Box. Perfect body type to learn from a guy like Charles Oliveira in that camp out there. They will know exactly what they're doing with her particular skill set. So I expect improvements from Polyana Viana. I know it's not a sexy number, especially for women's MMA, but I'll say under 2.5. Tabatha Ricci will know what she's doing if she gets in top position. She's aggressive with her ground and pound. She likes to punch people in the mouth. And Polyana Viana, she can snap somebody's arm off from pretty much anywhere. So I do think there's some finishing upside for both women here. I'll say under 2.5. Duško Todorović taking on Chidi Njokuani. Total on this one is 1.5. The over 1.5 is minus 160. The under 1.5 is plus 140. And this is a spot where I would be a little tempted on that over. We saw Chidi Njokuani come out in his last fight and just absolutely blast Marc-Andre Barriault. Everybody's expecting him to win this fight by knockout, and relatively easily. They're all kind of looking past Duško Todorović in this spot. And I just personally do not understand. I think that Duško Todorović is a guy that everybody was super high on just a couple of years ago. He's had a couple of rough fights, but he stood in there with a guy like Gregory Rodriguez and showed how tough and durable he is against a guy that hits that hard. So I do think there is some chance that even if Chidi does end up winning this thing, even if it does end up being a KO, I think that Duško can have a bit of a good showing. I think he'll be able to survive early, and I think over 1.5 is kind of the way to go here. I think these guys will clinch up, go against the fence, maybe have some straight up grappling, but I do think this fight will last a little bit longer. Over 1.5, minus 160. Michel Pereira taking on Santiago Ponzinibbio. Total set at 2.5 here for your co-main event. The over 2.5 is minus 160. The under 2.5 is plus 145. And I think you can make arguments for both these guys being big caliber strikers and this thing going under. However, they're both kind of decision machines. We've seen that in their last couple of fights. Both of them really like to control the range. Pereira especially likes to explode in and out of distance. He's very hard to touch, very hard to hit. I think Santiago Ponzinibbio is going to be chasing him around the entire night, and they do tend to slow just a little bit. Michel Pereira especially, after having a high work rate in that third round, he does dip off just a bit. But I think that they will both be slow enough at that point. I think his defense is intact enough that he'll be able to avoid singular power shots, and he's just big for the division. I think over 2.5, minus 165, the way these guys fight makes total sense. Main event time. Ketlen Vieira taking on Holm. Total set at 4.5 for this one. Your 5-round women's MMA fight, we still have that chalky over on the 4.5 here. Minus 240, plus 210 on the under 4.5. Ketlen Vieira has a tendency of getting tired and slowing down. We've seen her KO'd straight up by lesser competition before, so I worry a little bit about the durability. And everybody knows I'm a massive fan of Holm. She is one of, if not the GOAT of women's MMA. I know Amanda Nunes has that title, but she is absolutely up there, top 3 all-timers. And if it wasn't for a last-second submission loss to drop her belt a couple years ago, the only person that's finished her has been Amanda Nunes. So she's got like 1 sub loss and 1 knockout loss. You just don't finish Holm unless you're the best of the best. And even when she did lose that submission, it was deep in the 5th round. She made a mistake. It was one tiny moment that if you run that back, she wins that fight 9 out of 10 times, 9.5 out of 10 times. It was one fluke mess up there. So I think Holm is the goods here. Even though she's 40 years old, I think she's going to be able to handle Ketlen Vieira. And we've seen that Holly will do whatever it takes to win. So if Ketlen gasses out, I could see Holly getting a late finish, a late sub, something like that. But I also can see Holly just kind of slowing the pace down, grinding her up against the fence, kind of like she did to Raquel Pennington, controlling the range and the pace, and this thing going over that 4.5 and hitting the judges' scorecard. So I'll say over. That is the total takedown, folks. Make sure you tune back in tomorrow for the undefeated post-weigh-in show right here at Pub Sports Radio. Good luck. Let's roll.